Hey, what's going on, friends? My name is John Waldman. I'm a filmmaker based in New York, and today let's talk about wedding filmmaking. Should you shoot weddings? Should you not shoot weddings? Let's dive right in. Alright, so a little backstory. My first paid gig ever was shooting a wedding. This was late 2014. I was still in college. It was my junior year. I was studying film, and through my junior and senior year of college, I started to film weddings pretty frequently. That was my main source of income, and even for my first few years after that, wedding filmmaking was my main hustle. It was my main niche. It was my primary source of income. So today I want to talk about my experiences shooting weddings. I've filmed about 130 weddings in my lifetime, and now at this point in 2023, I consider myself retired from wedding filmmaking. That's not to say I wouldn't shoot one last minute, help a friend out, or maybe a friend wanted me to shoot their wedding, as long as, it depends how close we are actually, because I'd probably rather be a guest. But I want to talk about the things I like, the things I don't like, some tips, so yeah, let's do it. Many people go about wedding filmmaking in different ways in terms of the way they have their business set up. I went the freelance route, and by that I mean I would primarily shoot for wedding video production companies and photographers, where they would be handling the business side, and they would just hire me as a subcontractor to either show up as a first shooter, a second shooter, or if I was contracted through a photographer, I was, being hired to kind of do the whole thing from start to finish in terms of shooting and editing. That being said, I really liked being a subcontractor because you just show up for the day, you get either a flat day rate or an hourly fee, whether you're a second shooter, first shooter, solo shooter, or even if you do drone, you could get a rate for that. I like that though, because you just show up for the day, shoot, you hand them the footage, never have to think about it again. You don't have to worry about the business side of things, you don't have to deal with the couples, the contracts. To the flip side, I know a bunch of people that started their own wedding video production companies, and that was never a route I really wanted to go. I never had my sole passion in that. Out of those 130 weddings that I've shot, maybe 5 to 10 of them were my own personal clients, but the majority of this was working as a freelancer. All right, so why should you film weddings? Once you get your foot in the door and you build a little bit of a portfolio, the work is extremely scalable and can become very consistent. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say you are working for wedding video production companies. They will give you dates all throughout the year. If you're doing good work and they trust you and you represent their company well, they will fill your calendar up. If you have your own wedding business, talk about it being scalable. You get your first couple, you do a great job, and then the cousin's getting married in a year. Guess what? They probably loved your video. They're gonna hire you for your wedding. Or if the sister of the bride is getting married in 2 years, just from one wedding, you could get 3 jobs, just like that. So it's very scalable, it's very consistent. Continuing on, it is a great way to make solid money, and as you kind of progress and move into more higher end weddings, it can become very lucrative. Shooting in college, I was getting a pretty solid hourly rate. That was my first time making real money, from filmmaking. The more you do it, the more you get to charge. I think shooting weddings is an amazing place to get started. You get thrown into so many different scenarios throughout the day, and I think it helps you become a really good shooter. When you go to the bride and the groom's house for the preparations and you are filming, the rings, the shoes, the dress, all these things, you're basically doing product photography. You're developing an eye for shooting product. And that could lend itself, again, into other types of niches, for other commercial or fashion kind of stuff. During, the ceremony and the reception, you're basically shooting a documentary. You are documenting something in real time, multiple cameras, audio. It is such a good practice, albeit it is a high stress practice, but yeah, it is such a good learning experience. You don't get any mulligans. You have to get it right in camera first time. So when you bring the couple out and you're posing them during, golden hour or whatever, you're doing the bridal portraits. This type of directing could be used in so many different ways. Lifestyle, fashion, commercial, brand. It's obviously it's all weddings, but the stuff that you learn from there, you could apply that to different types of filmmaking. So shooting weddings also really forced me how to learn how to get my exposure right in camera, get my white balance correct, all these different things. Because a lot of the time you're gonna wind up shooting in a baked in profile, maybe it's a lower resolution or codec, so you don't have a lot of room to play in post. So you're kind of forced, you have to make it look good in camera. And I think because of that, because I did that for so long, it's made me a much better cinematographer over time because I had to do that 100+ times. So yeah, in shooting weddings, it's very rinse and repeat. The preparations, the ceremony, the reception, the dances, the toasts, it's all the same. Albeit your timeline is gonna change. Sometimes there is more X factors. And because of that, I think you could get into a really good rhythm and develop a style. And yeah, honestly, shooting weddings can be fun. When I first started, I genuinely really enjoyed it. For those first few years, I was real into it. I was all about that wedding grind, loved the hustle of it, the consistent work. Over time though, that changed. I kind of lost my passion in it and really lost the fun in it. All right, so now let's talk about why you shouldn't shoot weddings. This kind of rinse and repeat nature, I felt like I'm hearing the same toasts, I'm hearing the same songs at the reception. It's the same thing over and over again. And as a filmmaker, I feel like you're only growing if you are trying different things. You're putting yourself in uncomfortable positions. And after a while, because it's the same thing more or less every single time, I just got bored of it. If wedding filmmaking is your main hustle, you are gonna be working every weekend. Some people, it is literally every single weekend, just about, maybe not in the winter, depending of course of where you live. That dried out really quick for me. Most people have, their typical Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 jobs, and those are a lot of my friends, and usually my friends are hanging out on the weekend, and when I had to go shoot a wedding somewhere, I'd miss out on the fun. Working and all that is great, but at some point, you gotta make sure you are having a work-life balance and hanging out with the people that you love and care about. If you're only working on the weekends, it's gonna be harder to maintain those relationships with your friends. So I got tired of working weekends and just then sitting around during the week and be like, all right, what do I do? Another thing, the travel aspect. Some days you go up to 3 or 4 locations in a day. You're driving all around. I've had days where, we're shooting a 10-hour day and it's a 2-hour drive there, a 2-hour drive back. That's essentially making your day 14 hours. I don't know, that's just not fun to me. All right, and another thing is you're not gonna eat lunch. Pack your snacks, pack a sandwich, but you eat breakfast before the shoot, but there is no lunch break. The next time you're actually gonna be able to maybe get a chance to eat is at the cocktail hour or at the reception. And so that might be 8 hours, and that's including you are standing up that whole entire time, stressed out, running multiple cameras, driving all around like a lunatic. I don't really like the idea of, you have to work 8 hours in a row before being able to actually sit and take a break. That just makes the day a lot more difficult. Now, I don't wanna say this about every single wedding that I've shot, because a lot of them I've been treated very nicely by, the people that work at the reception hall or, country club, whatever it is. I've had multiple experiences where as a vendor, I was not treated well. A lot of times you are gonna be the last person fed. Every single guest will get fed before you do. And now mind you, you've been working all day. And by the time you get a chance to eat, a lot of times you sit down, you get no more than 5 minutes, and all of a sudden, and the bride and groom are gonna do their parents' dances. You basically have to scarf your food down, run all the way back out just to capture that moment. Can I please just get 15 minutes just to sit down and just decompress? I've been running around like crazy. Sometimes there's not even a place for you to sit down, and they're like, oh, you're a vendor, you gotta go upstairs. And they basically put me in the corner of this room with the rest of my gear, and I had to sit on the floor. All these little instances, it just started to really irk me. I really don't like being treated this way. Another thing is working with photographers. Now, there's so many amazing photographers that I've worked with and have really made the days great. But to the flip side, I've had a ton of photographers that absolutely ruin the day. Listen, you're allowed to chime in, you could get your shot, but the photographer kind of runs the show. I get that. They probably have a little bit more stress than we do as video shooters. But there's so many times I've had where the photographer just blatantly does not care about me, does not care about the team. They'll stand in the way of the cameras. I love to be open with communication. During the ceremony, I'll tell the photographer, hey, this is how I like to set things up, and I'll work with them. Sometimes they'll just stand right in front of my lens when my camera's right in the middle of the aisle, when I've told them, hey, I could go far back, put it on a 70 to 200. I'll even put it a little bit more to one side so you could cheat to the other. But no, they'll stand right in front of me. Or they just don't care at all about our shots, or it's the second I ask for one thing, they're like, speed, speed, speed. I'm just gonna kind of call it for how it is. And I've also experienced this fronthand. There is kind of a weird stigma about people that only shoot weddings. I think it's not valued as highly as other kinds of work. I personally disagree with this because I know some photographers and videographers that primarily shoot weddings that are fantastic shooters, amazing. But I've had times earlier in my career when I was, again, this was my main thing, it was my main portfolio. I was having a hard time switching over to, the commercial or the corporate world because they're like, oh, this guy just shoots weddings. They're like, come back to me when you have some other stuff. if you're trying to do this, it is so easy to scale, but it is bad because it is so easy to get stuck doing this. A side note on that note, I don't love having to book a date out in advance. What happens? You have a concert you want to see. You have a friend's wedding that you actually want to attend to, or a family function. And luckily I've shifted my business completely. That was one thing I really hated. I feel like there was multiple things I had to miss out on. When you're a lead shooter, you at times are doing 3 jobs at once. You could be manning 2 cameras and worrying about audio. That is extremely stressful. Now think a lead shooter during a ceremony, they're gonna be running around, probably checking 2 cameras, checking their audio. It gets really intense. During the reception, I have to monitor the audio for the speeches, but then I gotta run back to my cameras and see if they're still good. So it's a very hectic, stressful job. I don't wanna sound bitter. Listen, like any success that I like to think that I've achieved at this point is because I got my start there. I am very thankful for that. This is a great place to get started. But now after doing it for so long, I know this is not for me, but maybe it is for you. And I don't wanna deter you from that. I just wanna share my experiences because I think it's valuable, and all the stuff that I'm saying, I wish I had heard all those years back. Guess I had to live through it, and now I'm gonna share it with you guys. All right, number 1, find out where the wedding is, please. Whether you're with a wedding video production company, a bride and a groom, whatever it is, find out where the wedding is. I've been burned before, where the wedding video production company, they'd give me dates. I wouldn't ask where it was, but then, the week of, I found out, oh, that's a 3-hour drive for only a 6-hour shoot. At that time, I went to school like right outside of Baltimore. I was driving all around the DMV. But find out where your weddings are, and if you don't want to drive far, there you go. You tell them, no, I'm not driving 100 miles. Number 2, find out the hours. This is more so if you are working through a production company. I remember being hired for a wedding. I took a date off, and when I got the call sheet, I was just the second shooter. I saw on the call sheet I was only contracted for 2 hours. I could have had a full 10-hour day that day. And at that time, when that was my main source of income, that is significant. Find out your hours on top of your locations. All right, next up, just know your worth, know your rate, know what you want to charge for your second shooting, for your first shooting, and your solo shooting. I like to charge more when I'm solo shooting because then you're doing even more jobs. Solo shooting sucks. I always try to get a second shooter, an assistant. So whenever I negotiated my rate down, I always wound up having a problem with that company. It was always something. It wouldn't be the most transparency or whatever. Stick to your guns, know your rate. If they don't want to pay it, that's on them. You'll find someone else that will, because at the end of the day, if you know your worth and you really believe in that, someone else will. And so just wait for those people to value your work. Also, another pro tip, just make sure you have as many backups as possible. Multiple cameras, lights, audio, memory cards, batteries, all that. You don't want to be the guy that shows up, your camera breaks, and you only have one. Chances are, though, if you're shooting weddings, you will definitely have 2 cameras, but just please have backups. So after shooting a couple of weddings, I'd make like a wedding reel and like put together my 1-2 minutes on my best clips, and then I would Google whether, when I was in Baltimore, I would look up Baltimore wedding video production companies, or when I was on Long Island in New York City wedding video production companies, and then there's hundreds of them. Reach out to them, ask them, hey, do you need freelance shooters? Here's my stuff, here's my rate, here's my kit. Anyways, the more reaching out that you do, the higher the chances you're gonna be able to find work. All right, guys, so that's about it for today. I know this was a little bit different than my, normal set of videos. I, do a lot of gear-centered stuff, but I've really been wanting to make this video for a while because shooting weddings was a big part of my career. And so now I guess the question is, should you shoot weddings? Should you not shoot weddings? What do you think? Let's have a discussion down in the comments. I want to know your experience shooting weddings, or maybe you've completely disregarded it. I'm interested to know also, how'd you get your start in filmmaking? This was fun. I feel like I actually got a lot of meaningful stuff out on the page. There was a lot of stuff I feel like I could really speak from the heart on this because, it was a big part of my life. If you could like the video, that would be awesome. Subscribe if you haven't already. Let's hit 1,000 this year. That's one of my goals in 2023. We're like 55% of the way there. Cheers. Whoopsh. Bye.